Hi, and welcome to Off the Beaten Tracks, the only show on YouTube where nothing you do with a fork is against the law.
Hi, and welcome to Off the Beaten Tracks. I'm Roxanne, and my guest today is the award-winning singer-songwriter, Anna Gutmanis. Hi, Anna.
Hey, Roxanne, it's great to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you again. Well, you're here today to talk about this particular album, the self-titled Anna Gutmanis.
Indeed.
This came out in October of 1989, so it's a little over 30, around about our age.
There you go. Yeah, I was just a baby. Who knew?
I gotta ask you, how did you get Ken Tobias to do backups?
So the fellow that wound up producing the record, Robert Weber, had a connection with Ken. And so he was always popping in for sessions, whether he was singing along or not. But to sing that particular duet with him was amazing.
Looking through the cast of characters and stuff, you seem to have surrounded yourself always with excellent talent.
Well, you know, I just got lucky, I think, because Robert had all of these connections, and also the amazing, rhythm duo. Bass, I believe, was Rob Laidlaw. Drums, Randy Cook. I mean, at that point, I think Randy was pretty new as a drummer. He was amazing. But, he went on to play with people like, Alana Miles, Alanis Morissette, and then internationally people like Mick Jagger and Pointer Sisters. So, I mean, solid people. Yeah, I just got very lucky. It was really a wonderful experience, and I didn't know yet that had he had that experience, I probably would have been starstruck about Randy as well.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the songs on here.
Sure.
I particularly liked Till Doomsday.
Oh, that was a favorite of mine too. Interesting story, because this was obviously recorded in the late 80s. Eurythmics were pretty high on my musician love list. And the home demo that I made of that actually sounded a lot more electronic, a lot like sort of Annie Lennox, Dave Stewart influenced. Mm-hmm. And I think actually Randy Cook later played with Dave Stewart too, so super small world. Now we turned it more into almost like a blues tune, more like something Etta James would cover.
Right.
But that wasn't my original intention. But when things started unfolding in the studio, I was like, wow, this sounds awesome.
Well, and you always had that strength in your voice as well. It comes through so strongly, the blues tinge.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. Mm-hmm. It was funny, my mom went to one of the sessions. She was in town. She lived in London, but she was in Toronto, I think probably to go see an opera. And she dropped by one of the sessions, and she said, oh, you don't need all those guys singing with you, because that was the day we had a bunch of the male backup singers, and all of us were singing the backups for Till Doomsday. And it turned out I did need them, and they sound fantastic, but that was my mom's way of saying she was proud of me, which is kind of nice, because I didn't get to hear that very often.
Now, this was just 6 songs.
Just the 6.
So, what made you decide just the 6?
Well, it was the era of releasing the EP, I would say. A lot of people that I had worked with, one of the other musicians I had worked with in the recent past was Andrew Cash. And, he used to release EPs and so forth. L'Étranger did that, that he was with before. And it just seemed sort of like the right thing to do. I mean, also, quite frankly, financially. Because, basically I paid for this baby with my hard-earned waitressing dollars. So, to release a full-length album at that time would have meant so many more dollars. So right. I just wanted to be really selective in the songs and just make it really strong, sort of a core of what I was doing at the time.
So who would you consider some of your influences along the way, in your writing in particular?
Well, writing in particular, I'd have to say my sort of holy trinity is Laura Nyro, Billy Joel, and Stevie Wonder. I mean, there's a slew of other artists that I love and appreciate, but those are probably the 3 that I think have influenced my writing the most.
When we've talked to some people about the difference, for instance, Robbie Rocks, for instance, who's almost all indie except for the one on Quality Records.
Okay.
And we've talked to him about sort of the difference of how you have never really done anything but the indie stuff, have you?
No, I mean, I would have been open to not being indie in the 80s, but then after I came back to the industry, and the industry had changed so much over those 15 years that I dropped out, I was really bound and determined to stay an independent artist. And I have heard, horror stories from friends and acquaintances who were signed, and and the way that their souls are basically owned, and they're on the hook for all of these very expensive decisions that they don't always get to make, but they have to be paying back, every single hour of studio time that might be extremely expensive and not where they would have chosen to record, and that kind of thing. So at least this way, even if I'm scrambling for every dollar to record, at least it's me that has the control over it.
That's right. At the end of the day, you're making all of the decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
So you recorded this at, was it Reaction?
Yeah, Reaction Studios, yeah.
And so that was, where was that?
Well, it was basically around King and Strawn. I think it was on Stafford Street. It did relocate a few years after that. But I was at the original one. And it was funny, just this morning I was looking to see if I could find any pictures of the original one online. I couldn't. I found some of the later ones. I think some of them were actually on Bruce Coburn's website because he had recorded at the studio once it moved. But of course, then it particularly makes me wish that I had taken a camera one day. But somebody's got to have some pictures of the old Reaction Studios.
It just gets harder and harder to find as the internet gets fuller and fuller of stuff. And everybody is constantly taking photos now.
For sure.
So it pushes it all back.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So this album, what sort of reaction did you have? I'm assuming you played around town primarily, or did you do a lot of touring?
I actually played around town mostly.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of sort of smaller gigs. I was always political, so I was always doing benefits too, whether it was, for women's shelters, or I did one, we used to have this place, I don't know if you remember years ago, called the Fallout Shelter, Trojan Horse, all of those sort of social justice, environmentally conscious places that existed in the 80s in Toronto. I would somehow find a way of playing at. And we basically promoted it to radio across Canada. I mean, it was mostly campus and the smaller stations. Some CBC stations did pick it up as well. I got a bunch of good interviews. The one that I remember most clearly is the one I did with Hal Harbour at CFNY. That was super fun. We recorded it, pretty much exactly 30 years ago, because I remember it aired on New Year's Day 1990, which was so exciting. I was looking forward to New Year's Day just to hear that on the air.
Yeah, everything like that. There's a terrific feeling of look at me, Mom!
I know.
I'm in the big time.
Yeah, it was so exciting.
And the first time that you sort of heard it played, were you at home or in a car, or that you heard it on the radio?
Yeah. Well, I definitely tuned in that day to listen to it. And there were a few times when I heard some of my stuff on the radio while I was driving, and that was really cool, actually. When it's unexpected, it's the best feeling in the world.
You're singing along, and then you realize, that's me.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And then you just feel like going, woohoo.
So, after this was when you started the work on the I Am Who I Am.
Yeah.
And that was 2007?
Yeah, we recorded it. I actually went to Wilmington, North Carolina. There was a producer I'd been wanting to work with for a while, and she had lived in Toronto during the 90s, but that was the decade after 1993 that I basically dropped out of the business. And so I wasn't really looking to record at that point in time. And then after that, she had moved back to the States. She's originally, I think, from New York, and had relocated there, and was really open to my coming down and staying there, and had a fantastic 3-day weekend during which we recorded those two songs. That and what I used to call the B-side was Let It Slide.
Right.
Although I did release that as a CD single. I mean, by that time, vinyl really was... Yeah, it wasn't cool like it is now. It had gone out, but it hadn't experienced the renaissance that it's experiencing now.
Yeah, there was a big gap there. Near 30 years.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you were working with Karen Kane at that time.
I was.
And you seem to love to work with her. You worked with her a lot.
Yes, I have. Well, the thing is, too, that I think I had alluded to, some of the homophobia I had encountered. I've also encountered a fair bit of sexism. I'm sure you have, too, over the years. Yeah. And so I was really wanting to work with somebody who identified as a feminist and as somebody who was, you know, in the community and all of that. And, you know, Karen definitely fit the bill. And, you know, still there aren't that many women producers around. She is still really, I would say, on the cutting edge of things. I think she's now actually teaching at the university there, but she's also doing a lot of production work. But yeah, I just like, I think she has a great ear, and she has a great respect for artists, so it's always a joy to work with her because of that.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, that would have been your first taste of the award-winning started then, didn't it? Because the I Am Who I Am became such a, almost a, what is that called?
Like
Anthem.
Almost like an anthem, yeah. Judy Doyle called it that, which was a huge thrill for me. He runs something called Queer Music Heritage, and so many of the artists that are now researching queer music history basically think of his website and all of his archives as being like the Bible.
Right.
Like a couple of years ago, this book came out. I think it was called Breaking Down the Walls of Heartache. And the number of times that the author cited J.D. Doyle in that, I mean, I lost track of them because his research is really outstanding. So
Really?
when he called it that, I was totally thrilled.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And of course, you've recently re-released it. It's a dance video.
I have.
I was watching that today.
Hey, cool. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've actually always liked dance music. I mean, truth be told, I grew up during the disco era, and I actually loved disco music for several years. I didn't see myself necessarily doing that, especially as a singer-songwriter. But, you know, there's something about dance music and the way that it really goes to the heart and to the, literally to the heartbeat. I think I had always wanted to explore. And then a couple of summers ago, I was marching in a pride parade, and I wondered how it would sound as a dance tune. So I basically emailed Karen Kay and said, "What do you think?" And she just got to work on it right away. And she, you know, worked also with some of her colleagues there. I think that she was teaching, and also that she regularly recorded with. And then, you know, when it came time to master it, I took it here locally to a guy named Brian Gagnon, and he added so much to it that I really felt I had to give him a co-producer credit. He added so many of the lovely textures and nuances that you hear on the final product. And yeah, so that was really exciting. I didn't actually go into the studio for any of this. It was all, you know, really digital age wizardry. Yeah, which is a new thing. I had never released a song that way before.
And the video, of course, just won another award.
It did. Oh yeah. Oh, I was so lucky to meet Davina. She's an amazing, talented director. And yeah, so I met her, I think last October. Said that I really wanted to release something in time for, you know, the 10-year anniversary of the first release, and she was like, "Great, yeah, we'll have it ready by Pride," and so she did, and it's been starting to make the rounds of the film festivals, and it looks like it's a really auspicious beginning.
It's fantastic. I was so pleased for you when I saw that it won this. The Virgin Springs Cinefest Women's Gold Medal Award. Not too shabby.
Not too shabby.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, yay, Davina.
Davina Hayter.
Davina Hayter, yeah.
I gotta give her credit on there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun just sort of looking up all the different things that you've done and places. Now, how in the world did you wind up in the Euro Pride in Latvia?
Well, I myself didn't, although I would have loved to go. As somebody who has Baltic roots myself, my parents were born in Latvia, and actually when it was independent. And I've always felt a very strong connection there. And, you know, like much of Eastern Europe, LGBTQ rights are very, I would say, tentative. I mean, you know, the activists there are really brave.
Right,
They really have to be. So, you know, I definitely wanted my music to be a part of, you know, big celebrations like Euro Pride. And when it was held in Riga, I had reached out to somebody who was part of one of the Latvian queer groups that I had, you know, started to follow and connect with on social media. And she was like, "Oh yeah, great. You know, we'll play it at our events and so forth." I would have loved to be there, but I just had to kind of absorb the vibes from across the ocean.
That's fantastic, though. I mean, it just seems to you've had so many interesting places that the music has gone. Wouldn't it be nice to have gone on that record and just flown over Australia?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, I actually did go to Australia for years ago now, actually.
Wow.
And to visit a friend who was also a radio host. And so I co-hosted actually her radio show with her, which was super cool. And of course she played a couple cuts of my music, so that was nice.
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about these 2 singles that you did in 2014.
I had wanted to put out 2 songs because I knew I didn't have another album on the horizon financially. Again, not that I wouldn't have loved to had I won the lottery. But, you know, I wanted to also show something a little different than what I'd done. And yeah, lately It's Cold has also been a really great success. It won a Global Music Award a year ago, which was totally unexpected and great.
So we should talk a little about Glimmer in the Dark, because that's when I met you, of course. Was when you were just releasing that CD, and
That's
there was
right.
some really great writing on that.
Oh, thank
I
you.
thought the people, what's the full title
Yeah,
of
people
that?
got to get it together.
People got to get it together.
Yeah.
That was my favorite, and I really had high hopes for you for that one, because I think it was up for another award as well.
Yeah, it was up for a Right Out TV award, actually. Yeah, I think that was the year that Jamie Anderson cleaned up on everything. All the awards categories I was in, she was in, and she cleaned up. That's okay, I love her. Yeah, that was one of the ones we performed, of course, at the CD release.
Yeah.
The story behind this is interesting because I had originally had it on my demo tape as a Motown style song.
Really?
Because I've always loved Motown
Yeah.
too. And I sort of meant it as perhaps, you know, old Marvin Gaye Motown vibe with 70s Marvin Gaye social justice message. But the interesting thing is when we recorded the bed tracks that way, there was a mistake made. It was saved to the wrong kind of, Karen will kill me because I don't know, I'm not a techie, but it was saved to the wrong kind of bit rate or something. And so we had to go in and record it again. But she had a brainwave in between then and the day that we rescheduled to record the bed tracks for that. She said, you know what, this might be a good thing that we can't use this. Why don't we slow it down and do it as a gospel tune?
Yeah.
And then she brought forth a whole bunch of arrangements for that, and it really was so much fun doing it that way. The Motown version would have been fun too, but this makes it almost like the centerpiece of the album.
Yeah, which is how I felt about it.
Yeah.
When She Loves You, the a cappella group,
Yes.
actually was doing it behind you.
Absolutely.
It was a lot of fun.
Oh, so much fun, and you guys sounded amazing that evening. Yeah, it was, yeah, I just had a blast. Well, I got lucky in that my producer at the time, because I worked with him at the restaurant and he was also a musician, he and I did a lot of home demo work at his place. We basically recorded all of the cuts as demos at his place, and then took that, and he made notes on every part, everything that he wanted to see. And so it was really quite organized by the time we took it to Reaction Studios. And and the musicians that he got on board, I'm sure that they had listened to all the demos very thoroughly.
And the producer on this was produced and arranged by Robert Weber. How
Weber.
did you meet him?
Well, I just happened to meet him at the restaurant that I was working at, the same restaurant where I met, you know, Andrew Cash and Chuck Angus from L'Étranger and Rick Winkle from Vital Signs. I mean, there were a bunch of us musicians at that restaurant. And so Robert and I started talking, and he was a musician himself and was in a number of bands in the city, but really wanted to move more into the production end of things. And, you know, and he was obviously hanging out with Ken Tobias a lot, and I think had picked up a lot of pointers from Ken and the other fellows. The engineers I have to mention who worked on this were both fantastic. Roby Banerjee and Ormond Jobin. They wound up in different parts of the world. I think Ormond is now on the west coast on Vancouver, and I think Roby's still in LA. But yeah, they were absolutely a joy to work with, and very professional. And so, Yeah, there were definitely times when I was tense about, are we doing one too many takes? Because Robert was a perfectionist, for sure. But it was the first time that I had undertaken something like this, so I didn't know what to compare it to. I mean, all the best producers are perfectionists, I think.
Right.
But in those days particularly, perfectionism was, not without its costs. But it all worked out in the end, and luckily I just kept on working during the whole recording process. I believe we booked sessions mostly in the evening. I would work in the day, and then we'd do our evening sessions. And yeah, it was a tired but exhilarating kind of time, for sure.
It sounds like it was a lot of fun.
Oh, it was fun. It was fun, yeah. And it really is hard to believe that it has been 30 years. Well, if you consider the time that we spent doing the demo tapes and at Reaction Studios, I mean, we probably started the project in 87, so really that's more like 32 years. I think these songs still stand very well today, and that's definitely something that I always strive for in my projects. It's something that I get with Karen Kane as well. It's something that it's worth it, even if it's hurting your wallet a little bit. You don't want to go home with anything that you're not happy with for life, because you will be listening to it for the rest of your life.
Oh, yes.
and you don't want to have regrets.
One little glitch and it's all you hear. Exactly.
Well, especially being the musicians that we are. Yeah, absolutely. We know every little imperfection, for sure.
Yeah, this is really interesting, very 80s, almost sort of Robert Palmer girl look to it, doesn't it?
A little bit. I was also probably trying to channel Kate Bush a little bit, because I was, she was one of the many songwriters that influenced me, especially in the early 80s. I just really dug her. So, yeah, it does have a very 80s look to it. I mean, I always liked black and white photography, and I still opt for that whenever possible. But, yeah, this was just the result of many photo sessions with a friend of mine who is an excellent photographer, and that we wound up choosing that one. I thought we were going to choose one that was maybe taken outdoors. I mean, we went everywhere. We went outdoors. We went to Hart House at U of T, which has some great backdrops, UC. We went all over, and then of course we wind up choosing a picture that was taken in my apartment. But that's probably where I was most comfortable.
That's true.
Yeah.
The overall design was done by?
Yeah, by Hollygraph Design.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was actually a friend of a friend that I worked with again. Again, it's not just musicians who you find working at restaurants to pay for their arts habit. It's also designers, and my friend was very much into clothing design and fashion, and so he had a friend who was into graphic design and recommended her, and I think she did a fantastic job.
Well, it's striking. It remains striking.
Thank
It's
you.
timeless as well. That the look is timeless.
Yeah. No, it has aged pretty well, I think. Yeah. I didn't want to go with something that would be so odd as to, sort of make people think, ooh, But I wanted something striking, and I knew that was striking.
Yeah, you didn't want to be like a flock of seagulls.
No, that's not my style.
Regretting hair forever.
Yes, that's right, yes. I kind of have the 80s hair going on, but you can't see it because the photo ends there.
Yeah. What are you working on now?
Now I'm working on a project. I don't know if I can say too much about it at this point in time, but I'm involved with lots of things in the LGBTQ community. And I'm writing a song for one of them, and I think that's going to be a really exciting endeavor. I'll probably be able to talk more about it in the coming months, but it's a project that I'm really excited about. And then in the meantime, I think just keep on promoting the video, especially at film festivals, and trying to get the new version of I Am Who I Am even more out into the world than it has been. And film fests are a great way to do that, because people are just as drawn in by visuals as by music. And, when the two of them are together, sometimes they're more drawn into the single than they would have been otherwise if they're like real hardcore film fest people, so yeah.
Thanks for joining us today with Anna Gutmanis. I'm Roxanne, and you've been watching Off the Beaten Tracks.
really miss the old days. For me, that was last Saturday.